morning. Brothers and sisters, join in imitating me and observe those who live according to the example you have in us. I want us to consider what imitating involves and what Paul is actually talking about. Join me in imitating. Paul obviously is confident that he is doing what Christ wants. He is somehow saying to the church in Philippi, I want you to do the same. Now, if I were to say to the church at St. Luke to join in imitating me, well, nobody got problems with the priest. And we can complain about all sorts of things. That is one of the problems with the church. When it comes to imitating, who are we imitating? Are we imitating Christ? Are we imitating each other? What or who are we imitating? I got a lot to say this morning. Get comfortable. When we speak about imitating, it is none other than Jesus Christ. The problem, however, is we see something that we like and we go with that. If what is going on isn't necessarily what you like, then you have problems with that. We are called to preach the gospel in season and out of season. That is not my job, that is our job. So preaching isn't the domain of the priest. If anybody want to preach next Sunday, they can let me know now. But again, in imitating, they say the priest is lazy, he don't like to work. When we look at what it is we're called to, it is something very serious. If what we're doing isn't patterned after the life of Jesus, then we're doing the wrong thing. But the thing is, you're not to say certain things. So I guess we'll say them quickly so you don't get too annoyed. I want to share a story with you. This story jumped back into my head last week. The story is about Alexander the Great. Now, Alexander had conquered pretty much everything. And all of the story come back to my head, so I can't tell you where he was going to conquer next. But the night before he went on this campaign, he was nervous. Maybe it was someplace that had a bigger army. Probably men that look big and strong like me. But he was nervous. And he was walking through the camp, mingling in the midst of the soldiers. The soldier that was on duty was asleep. Now this is an offense punishable by death, because other person's lives are dependent on you being not just awake, but alert. As Alexander approached the soldier woke up. You'd appreciate that the fellow frightened, because not only are you caught sleeping, you're caught by the king. And Alexander asked him, soldier, what is your name? And he said, Alexander, sir. And the second time he said, what is your name, soldier? He said, Alexander, sir. And the third time he asked, soldier, your name? And he said, sir, my name is Alexander. And Alexander said to him, I will suggest two things. Either change your behavior or change your name. A lot of us need to follow. Either change our behavior or change our name. Because if we're going to claim to be Christian, then there's certain things that is expected of us. We had this analogy again, we'll use it again. Already, we'll use it again. Some of you go to the supermarket and you buy particular brands. So you're making cuckoo, you can buy what type of meal? Everybody buying Valerica. Why are you buying Valerica? Smooth cuckoo. And we ain't wanting a lumpy cuckoo. You go to buy corned beef, you buy which brand? Them just buy Exeter. Which brand you just buy? You just buy Exeter too? You don't like corned beef? Me either. You go to buy canned peas. We buy MP. Okay? Who? I know about that brand. But the thing is this. You buy a particular brand because you get a particular satisfaction from the brand. You buy it because you expect something. Our brand, or logo rather, is the cross. Our brand name is Christian. When we don't live up to that brand, just like Valrico, if the next pack of Valrico buy give you lumpy cuckoo, you can think twice about buying it again. If you get more lumpy cuckoo, you're done with Valrico. That is the problem with the church, because there are some who have come and they've had a bad experience and they think twice about coming back. Maybe they came back again and they had a bad experience, so done with the church. Because, as Paul said, many of us live as enemies of the cross. We are not called to be enemies of the cross, but to embrace what the cross represents. We are those who bring hope to the world. We are those who preach faith, redemption, salvation, because we know it. Or do we? Because if we're not preaching those things, then we are enemies of the cross. I got some water here. Now, I'm sure some of you can look at this glass and tell me how much water this glass can hold. This is 12 or 10 ounces? 12. And we 3/4, so we got in what? 9? And we can say a gallon of water is how many? 10 pounds? And we can work it out down to the ounces. The thing is, what is the weight of this glass? Don't hurt your head mathematically. It does not matter what the weight of this glass is. What really matters is how long I hold this glass. Right now it is not a problem. An hour from now it might be. This time tomorrow, if I'm still holding it, I guess I'd be tempted to drink it so it won't be heavy anymore. This is the same thing with us as Christians. Because there are persons who do not experience what they should because we as Christians are not doing what we should. If you have a weight on your shoulder, the automatic thing to do is to bow over. There are lots of persons with weights on their shoulders. I'll tell you what I'm going to weight. There's a small sentence in Paul's epistle that had me a little concerned. Their God is the belly. Now I thought Paul was talking about big belly people like me. I said that might not make any sense, so I did some stuff. What is meant by their God is the belly. It is not so much about food, because around the time that this letter was written, food was scarce. However, if you ain't got no food, the next best thing is to go where there is food. The problem in much of this are the rich and the fortunate, who hold big banquets and fancy feasts and that sort of stuff. Now you'd appreciate, if you can't hold a big banquet, the next best thing is to go to a big banquet, some rich body or something like that, because it more or less ups your social status as well. You ain't holding none, but you're going to all. This is what Paul is really addressing. Those who have the physical desire, who are ruled by the physical things. Now, the word for belly here, kolia, conjugated gives us kolos, which means empty. much of our emptiness, or rather the gods that we serve, are empty. Much of our emptiness comes from past experiences, sometimes all the way back from childhood, where something has happened, and throughout our lives there's that echo of something that is missing, or there's some hollowness. The problem is we seek to fill these little cavities with round things. A lot of the hollow in our life can fall into some categories. So, we have anxiety, we have fears, we have self-doubt, we have rejection, despair. All of these are things that weight us down. But our job, imitators of Christ, what does that mean? Or what does that feel like to be an imitator of Christ? When you hear that, what comes to mind?
To live as Christ lived.
To live as Christ lived. How? How did Christ live? Doing the things that Christ did. Some people would mean that you need to put on sandals and find a dusty road to walk on. When we talk about living like Christ, again, it comes all the way back to love. We cannot do the things of Christ without love. You cannot share anything without love. That is just giving it. That is not sharing. You cannot embrace some persons without love. You're probably going to hug them up. You ain't embrace them. The things that Christ requires us to do calls first for love. So, persons are burdened. Our job is to lift those burdens, right? Or you don't see that as your business. Them in the business with that. Your job is to lift the burdens, right? You're sure? If I were to ask how many burdens you lift recently, what are you going to say? Are we doing our job? I will tell you how the church operates, or how I see the church as operating. We heap sin and burden on people. Remember, we is the church. Okay? All of us make up the church. But we know the drunkard, we know the thief, we know everybody, and that is the brand and the label we give to them. So instead of lifting burdens and allowing persons to lift their heads up, we continue to put on burdens and they bow down. Yet still we wonder why the world in which we live cannot say, I will lift up my heads onto the hills from whence cometh my help. They can't. Because they are laden heavy. Our job is to take away those burdens. If we're not doing that, then we're not imitating Christ. Because, remember the woman that was caught in prostitution? He that is without sin cast the first stone. Woman, where are your accusers? Remember little thief in short Zacchaeus? Jesus went and he sat and he ate with him. But we somehow decide who we associate with and who we don't associate with because you ain't a good or you ain't good enough. We even decide who can come to church and who ain't worthy of coming to church. Or if you ease in, what you get involved in and what you don't get involved in. That is the church. That is we. We need to understand, are we imitators of Christ or have we picked up bad behavior? Are you going with bad behavior? One of the things they said to me when we went to school, one bad apple spoils the bunch. The church needs to consider that. Because the flip side of that does not exist. One good apple don't do a thing to the bunch. It is the bad one. And when people see the bad, that is what stays with them. So, one bad person at St. Luke bad. One drunk person in Anglican church, Anglicans drunk. One homosexual within the Anglican communion, Anglicans is homosexuals. That is just how we operate. That is, sad to say, human nature. Be imitators of Christ. The thing is, can we join in imitating at all? Because Paul is calling us to join in imitating, but the thing is, what we have in our midst, is that something to imitate? In many places, we need to be the ones who set the example of what is to be imitated. Because unfortunately, if you look for it, you might not find it. But the thing is, our job is not to go around looking for people to be just like. We have the example in Jesus Christ. If we all lived up to that example, we ain't gonna got no problems. Jesus? He ain't had no problems. He problems with we is the same thing. We did the problem then. The thing is, when we talk about imitating, that is such a difficult thing, because we look for what we can see. We deal with what we can see. Very few of us know what the Bible says. So it is very easy for some person to come and say whatever they want, and we buy into it and go along with it wholesale. And then you find yourself years down the road mistaken. It sound good, but that was not it. Case in point, render your heart and not your garment. That ain't in the Bible at all. But it sound good. And it served its purpose as well. Where we offering our hearts, we ain't offering our garments. But the true text is tear your heart, not your garment. Then we got forgive and forget. I ain't find that yet. But we're called to forgive. If you forget, that's a matter for you. But as it relates to imitating Christ, are we willing to do it? Because if we're not, then we need to stop complaining. Because if we're not doing it, and that is the job of all of us. But the job some of us are now professional at is complaining. So we can complain about everything that everybody is doing or is not doing. But the question is, what are we doing? If you're imitating Christ, I don't find anywhere in the Bible that Christ was sitting down complaining. He dealt with situations. If something had to be fixed, he fixed it. If something had to be said, he said it. If something had to be done, he did it. Complaining didn't fit in. But many of us, our profession is complaining. So when it comes now to imitating, we can't get it done. Because instead of being imitators, we are now watchers. And we are looking to see who to imitate. And all we can see are those who should not be imitated, and we got problems. And we get vexed, and we left the church. Because they're not good, so we're going someplace else. It is left up to us to do what is right, so others have something to imitate. It is not of us to complain, but to be an example. Be the change that you want to see. And then we have persons that give you the impression they have no say. The little that they say will not be considered. That in itself is a hollow spot in our souls. Because there's no way you can come into the midst of God's people and don't belong. If there's anybody that makes you feel as if you do not belong, they do not belong. Because we claim to be all members of the same body with different roles to play, and we say that, I'm not sure if we believe it, because if we believe it, then you know this is where I am. This is what I have to do. Are we doing the things that God has set for us to do, or are we just coming and letting time pass? Because there's a difference between waiting on the Lord and wasting time till the Lord come back. too many of us are wasting time, and we should fear when the Lord comes back. We all have a job. We all need to get up and do that job. Because chances are, if you take on the profession of others and you just sit back and complain and look for something else to complain about, you ain't got no time to do what God has for you to do. Brothers and sisters, join in imitating me. That is what Paul said. That is what I am saying. That is what you are called to say as well. Join in imitating me. We can only say that if we live lives patterned after Jesus. We can only say that if we are an example of what Christ has put out there. We can only say that if we have love. Not if we like a few, if we have love. Minus love, we have nothing. Minus love, we are nothing. Let us use this Lenten period to draw closer to God, to draw from God what He wants in our lives. I invite you now to turn to hymn 491.